Hey guys, BJ the Brave here, back with another Warpforge video for you, and today I am talking about the best designed cards in Warpforge. Now, you may have already seen a video I did not long ago which talked about bad cards that needed changing. If you haven't seen that video, go and check that out, and I'll actually leave a link to it here in the video, so just above. But I thought I kind of wanted to look at the other side of the coin, because it's all very well talking about bad cards and things that you want to see improving, but I wanted to kind of like acknowledge the cards that I think are really well designed, the cards that are fun to play with, the kind of cards that I think offer a lot in terms of deck building. And I also thought, you know, if you were new to the game, or if you were maybe picking up a new faction, you might find it of interest in terms of, okay, which cards are really going to center your collection around, and you know, which ones you should probably prioritize in terms of building. So I figured what I'd do is kind of go through each faction and do no more than 5 cards. Some factions got less, but really just kind of like, what are the best design cards I think in the game that I always really enjoy. So I'm going to kick off with the Orcs, because many of you know that I've put a lot of time into the Orcs, and they're probably my favourite faction at the minute until the Tau come out. So the first card I want to talk about for the Orcs is Makari. So Makari the Grot basically only costs 1 energy, and what he does is he gives adjacent units +1 melee attack. And every time he dies, he just returns to your hand, and he does cost 2 more on until the turn ends, and he goes back to only costing 1, just so you can't kind of multiply play him in the same turn too easily. But the thing that's just a lot of people have called for Makari to be nerfed. I don't want to see Makari nerfed. I think Makari is an absolutely brilliant legendary. It's so rewarding. It's a card that it's worth saving up for and collecting, and once you've got him, it will transform how Orcs play. It's powerful, it's very powerful, but I don't think it completely breaks the game. It's one of those cards that feels like maybe at the top end of power level, that you can kind of go without it being broken, if that makes sense. But it's just so much fun, and one of the things I think it's so much fun is the flexibility and all the dynamic ways in which you can use Makari. Putting him next to your Warlord, so that your Warlord goes from 2 to 3 attack, which you can obviously then combine with things like other cards in the faction, like Proper Killy. Putting him in between a Squig Buggy and the Squig Bomb that comes out of it, so that if the opponent tries to kill the Squig Bomb, it can't then blow up. The explosion can't then blow up the Squig Buggy, all putting in between the Squig Buggy and your Warlord, so that Makari dies in the explosion and not your Lord if you need to protect health. So there's all these different scenarios where, depending on what you need, like Makari can kind of come in and fit the deal. So he's just, you know, it's cheap, so you get a lot of use out of him, and he's just a fantastic legendary. Next card I want to talk about that I think is on the best designed list. I've talked about him many times, but I'm going to give him a shout out again. It's actually one of the Warlords, and that's Gruk Face Ripper. Now, funnily enough, at the time of making this video, Gruk in many ways is, I don't want to say weaker, because it's not the right word. He's not as synergistic with the cards that came out in the recent Orc expansion. So right now he's actually not like the meta Warlord in the Orcs. He certainly has been. But in terms of the long term for the game, Gruk Face Ripper is, you know, I think he's got the best talent in the game, quite honestly. Really love what Gruk has to bring to the table. So it might seem simple at first. You think 2 energy, draw a card. Yeah. But the thing is, as I've said in multiple videos before, he's drawing a troop. And that adds a degree of like sophistication, if you like, if that's the right phrase, but to the deck, because it means that we can get clever about, okay, we know that we're thinning our deck of troops, so you can think about deck design. How many troops have I got in there? You can think about how many stratagems have I got. If I use this and pull a troop, then that means that the next turn when my natural card draw occurs, it's more likely to be a stratagem. So the other thing is that when it does draw the troop, it gives you +1 attack. So for example, if you want your if you have flankers in your opening hand, you might want to mulligan them away, because you might actually want to draw those using Gruk, because then they'll have +1 to the melee attack. Things like the Veteran Stormboy or the Warbike as a good examples of that. Draw a Warbike, suddenly Warbike for 3 energy can do 5 melee attack instead of 4. So it's that combination of the buff, the drawing specifically a troop, and how that thins the deck. And I just think from a deck building perspective, it always feels fun with Gruk. You know, you've always got an ability to kind of draw into the tools that you've put in your deck. Yeah, really like him, really like him. Alright, next card that I think is one of the best design cards in Warpforge is actually one of the newer cards to come out, and it's this guy, the Boss Knob. Now, when Ecclesiarch and I first reviewed the faction, if you've not seen that podcast episode of Forgecast, go back and watch it. We both were, I think we both saw this was a good card, but we weren't quite as up on how good it's turned out to be. It's actually turned out to be one of the best cards in the Gordrang expansion, and I just think he's a really wonderful card because, first of all, for 5 energy, he's got a really solid body with a 6 health. 5/3 is not too bad. You know, I always look for kind of fairly even stats, to be honest, if I'm thinking about a really well designed card there. 5/3 is not too bad, but what I like is that obviously the melee attack is good, and the mob ability, which is where you want to essentially you get a bonus every time another unit, including the Warlord, tracks with melee. And this guy then gives +1 to adjacent units. And again, so many ways in which you can do it. Like, you can just drop this next to your Warlord and use it as a way of healing. You can obviously drop it between a Warlord and a Vanguard unit, or sometimes you've got a unit that's down to 2 health, which means that the Warlord would kill it. So you can, for example, drop this between that and the Warlord, attack with your Warlord first, which will buff that unit's health up to 3, which means it can now attack the Warlord and it still survives. So there's a lot of different cool things, and one of my favourite ones is actually turn 9 playing him with Orc Knob. Orc Knob being the legendary card, so that they both have flank, so that now you can bring this guy on, and basically you end up putting him next to the Boss Knob next to your Warlord, and then the Orc Knob on the end, and the Orc Knob himself ends up getting +2 health as well. So yeah, a really cool card. Lots and lots of fun with this card, and I think it's going to slip into a lot of decks, particularly sort of like mid-range and control decks. Alright, next up, a really well designed card for me is the Veteran Stormboy. I mean, this card is, I think, potentially going to get nerfed. It might be too good, I'm not sure. If it's not too good, it's very much at the tippity top end of good that a card can be before it deserves a nerf. A flying unit that has high melee attack, 6, means that it trades very well into sort of its peers, if you like, you know, enemy flankers that cost like 5 and 6 energy. So it's a flanking unit with superb synergy, of course, because it's melee damage. It benefits from the Orc faction, so it benefits from Makari, who can give it +1. It benefits from Gruk, like we just talked about. Gruk pulls this guy, comes out at 7, put him next to Makari, he's now 8. This guy is an absolute beast. In addition to obviously being a beast and a flanker, which is gives you instant removal, he also has this extra ability when you deploy a Stormboy, give it flank. This guy is so good. I mean, honestly, he could be a 7 cost card, to be honest, for the stats that the combos it's got. I don't want to see that. I'd rather see him maybe just tone something down. Maybe the damage should go down to 3 here, or that should go down to 5, something like that. But it's a superb card, and it's that flexibility again that I love, that you could build a deck around the Stormboys and the Veteran Stormboy synergy with those guys getting a flank as well is just super powerful. I think it's a really well designed flanker, and I like to see more of these cards where they have like multiple abilities. Okay, so last but not least for the Orcs, in my best designed cards, I want to shout out Ardshell Gurk. Ardshell Gurk, I often refer to him as like the Lich Guard, the big Lich Guard of the Orcs. Like, he is the Vanguard unit, right? He is a big, beefy body with armor too. So quite unique in a sense. He's like the kind of the the tank, if you like, that you can just kind of put out there, and your opponent basically has to have hard removal, otherwise they're going to really struggle with this guy. But the thing that I love about his design is the fact that he also gets this follower of Gork. They could easily have just made him like this big tough vanguard, but they give him this follower of Gork. And the follower of Gork is actually really flexible, because again, for 2 energy you can give +2 melee attack and 2 health to a friendly troop, and often that doesn't have to be Gurk. Now when you use it on Gurk, it's great, because Gurk attacks or gets attacked and he's losing his health, and then you just keep basically healing him, you keep buffing him with that, and at the same time getting more stronger with the melee attack. So that's quite cool, you know, this big angry orc that gets more frenzied the more he gets hurt. But the other cool thing is being able to put that 2 on something else. So for example, next turn you bring on a flanking unit and you put it on that. So just again, lots of flexibility, allows you to respond to the board. Alright, so that is what I think some of the best designed cards in the Orc faction. Let's next talk about the Marines. So the first card I want to talk about is the Tactical Insight. It allows you to refill 2 energy. Now what a lot of people do with this is, and I talked about this on the video masterclass that we did with Papa Beard, but often what people will do is, for example, play like a Stern Guard, like a Codex unit, and then they'll use the Tactical Insight to gain 2 energy back and then trigger Codex again, and that's a really good way of using it, and that's definitely one way of doing it. But I think sometimes people get a little bit too obsessed with that being the way to use it, because actually what Tactical Insight does is it allows you to essentially cheat out tempo. So for example, if I have a 4-drop and a 3-drop and it's only turn 5, I can play both those cards, because I can play one of them, then play this, and it gives me the energy back, and then I can play the other one. So that in itself is a really, really powerful mechanic, and I actually think Tactical Insight, I think the better Marine players use Tactical Insight a lot more in that way. They use it to cheat tempo than they do to just trigger Codex a second time just for the hell of it. I think you should only trigger Codex a second time if it really matters, if it's like a situation where it's really going to make a difference. But I see many times people do it where they're just doing it because they can, and it's not really impacting the game that much, and I think that's a poor use. So this card has a lot of flexibility in the faction. Really, really great card. Next up, Tigerius. So speaking of flexibility, again, I love the design of this card. I'm not saying he's the best Warlord, but I do think he's the best designed. You know, the ability to have a choice of 3 different things every turn. This is like my ideal Warlord design in many ways. Like, give me a choice to respond to the battlefield. You know, the new Tau baseline commander is a similar thing. He's got a choice of 3 drones, we've just found out. I actually think that's fantastic. I think it means that you can, you know, if you need extra damage, you can choose Smite. If you really need to protect something, you can put the shield on, or obviously you can just draw. So really, really great design card, because it gives the player that freedom and autonomy to make decisions and adapt to the situations. Who do I want to go to next? I'm going to say Point Blank Shot. I mean, Point Blank Shot actually got nerfed. It used to be that you just dealt 2 damage and drew a card. Now it's as if the target dies, draw a card. And I wondered whether it'd still be played, but actually it's just as good. Well, nearly as good. I think this is a really good card. I like the idea. The problem with including cheap removal cards in most CCGs, so if it just said deal 2 damage, the problem is that you run out of resources quite quickly. There's always going to be those moments where you need the 2 damage, but that's it, that's the whole card. But because it essentially replaces itself by drawing a card, I think that's just really great design to kind of give the Marines some removal, but keep up in terms of card equity. Alright, next up I want to talk about Humanity Shield. Now, in some ways Humanity Shield is a problematic card, and I know that some people, particularly back in November in the Ultramarine meta, people were asking for this card to be nerfed. But I actually think it's a really good design card, because it provides a mechanic that's very unique in the game, and it allows for a play style, which is and that is usually sort of like an aggro beatdown play style that CCGs are known for, because when you get into a like beatdown matches with an opponent. Like it's what we call a race, where you're trying to end the game quickly, I'm trying to end the game quickly, and that's where Humanity Shield has a real niche. There aren't many cards that play into that scenario, because what it allows you to do is go, if the race is close, I can pop Humanity Shield, and now I've got that extra turn, and that's going to allow me to win the race, and I just win the game. And I really like that. I think that's a really good, well-designed card. The other thing it can do is there can be times where, like for example, a guy hits a unit with his Hemlock, for example, and you need to trade your Lord into his Hemlock to kill it, but because he's a flyer, you're going to have to attack his 8 ranged attack, and that would mean taking 8 damage to your face. So you can just pop Humanity's Shield to just basically be invulnerable and just attack for that turn. And then another way you can use it is sometimes if your opponent's got a few units down, like in stealth for example, and you've got flankers, you can't trade with them, you can just pop Humanity's Shield and go, well, what are you going to do? You're going to waste your stealth, and then you can't attack me because I'm immune. So again, some really good ways in which that plays into different battlefield scenarios. Really cool card. Okay, so next up, last but not least for the Ultramarines, I'm very deliberately going to pick a big card here. I want to talk about the Repulsor Executioner. I think this is a well-designed card, and this card really, I mean, I actually plan to use this card more in some of the Marine decks I'm looking at the minute, because it's a really well designed card, and it needs some praise for its design, because actually it does something that we want a lot of these big cards to do. A lot of these 10 cost cards, 9 cost cards, they're pretty useless because they don't do anything on the turn they come down. They've got big fancy stats and abilities, but you're never going to get to use them. Whereas what I love with the Repulsor Executioner is it's a whopping 10 energy. Potentially you can get it a little bit cheaper, you can cheat it out a little bit, but even at 10 energy, it's the fact that it comes on and has a major impact on the game. It comes on and it has that rally effect, and I want to see rally effects more and more on these big cards. Deal 8 damage to an enemy troop. That is absolutely fantastic. And then the secondary element is, if we do survive the turn, which it often will, is that it can have blast 4 as well as the big 10 damage the next turn. So really, really powerful card. Exactly what we want to see from a top end finisher. And the other cool thing is there's a synergy there with the 4-drop Antario Kronos, because this guy can kind of like draw a vehicle. So you could build the deck where you've got this and say 2 of those, and you can kind of draw it as well. So yeah, so they're my cards for the Ultramarines that I think are really well designed. Okay, next up I'm going to go on to the Eldar. So the first card I want to talk about with the Eldar is the 2-drop. This is potentially the best early cheap flanker in the game. Really, really powerful. Really importantly here is having that 3 health, so that the enemy warlord can't just destroy it with 1 attack. And then of course the Shuriken 2. So many scenarios here where you line up the Wind Rider to come on and basically kill a unit that has 2 health, so that your Wind Rider doesn't take any damage on the comeback, and it gives it this kind of scalability, because it can be effective at killing 6, 7 energy costing units, because it can be that finisher of killing the unit's health off and still surviving. And it does come with a 1 range attack, so if you do want to desperately need the 3 damage, you can do that as well. It also synergizes well with Warlock, which way you can grow this unit, so that can become 2, and the health can become 4. So super duper, dirt cheap, really effective flanker. Next up for the Eldari is the Howling Banshee. This is a brilliant card, and probably my favourite card in the Eldar, or the Eldari. Why is it such a good card? Well, because it has multiple effects that are all powerful. Right, so first of all, stats 4/4 for 4. Not bad, but then when you add the fact that it's got flank, then it's absolutely fantastic. So it's a 4 damage from hand essentially that we've got. It comes on and it can not only flank and attack, but it's the rally to stun an enemy. Often what you do is you stun the enemy warlord, and then take out the unit. So it's just a superb stall card. And then just the icing on the cake is that if it survives, sorry, when it dies, it leaves a waystone, so we can actually then cash that in for some tempo later on. So just everything you could possibly want to see from a 4-drop is wrapped up in this card. It's just a beautifully designed card, and it just offers you tons of flexibility. I mean, like, your opponent might have a big massive unit like the Land Raider, for example, that we just talked about from the Marines. You might need to use your Banshee to just stun that, for example, so that it can't attack you back. So there's a lot of flexibility in the way that it can be used. Another one that I really like in the Eldar is the evasive maneuver. It's not going to be in every deck, because it shouldn't be. Eldar do a lot of good tempo decks, and it's not right in a tempo deck, but in a sort of more mid-rangey control deck, evasive maneuver is going to be excellent, because heal 5 and give them camouflage to a friendly unit is really powerful, and the reason for that is that camouflage is unique in that it doesn't go away until you attack, and so being able to put that on your warlord that's dying and is really low on health and stop it from receiving enemy stratagems to burn them down is a super powerful, and I really think that's the hidden great design within this card that a lot of the other heal cards don't have. So I think this is a really offers, again, from the gameplay itself, a lot of flexibility and a lot of options with that card. And then for the Eldar, the other ones, like, just a kind of honourable mention I want to give is to the 5-drops. I think the Spirit Seer and the Wraithblade, which has just recently been nerfed to 5 melee. It used to be 6. When it was 6, it was excellent. And again, why I think these two cards are really good is that you cash in 2 of your stones to get a secondary ability. They're both okay on their own, like without the ability they're not bad, they're probably slightly underpowered, but then for the 2 stones they become like really good tempo shifters, right? This guy suddenly getting flank and armor, this guy getting to deploy a separate second body, so the stats that you're pumping out there are like 4 from the Wraithguard, so 9 health. You're putting out 9. Imagine a 5 card that had 9 health. I mean, the tempo that plays is absolutely brilliant. So a really nice kind of couple of cards there to feel to feel good about cashing in those hard-earned waystones. And the last one I want to talk about, I think, is a really well-designed card in the Eldar, is actually the Crimson Hunter, because what I like about this card is it has the somewhat boring, like, deal 3 damage to an enemy, but when I say boring, still effective, because it's something that happens the turn you come on, so that's good. It's a flyer, so flyer with 6 health, it's pretty survivable, and 5 range attacks to take it on. So the melee attack's less important because it's a flyer. Most things, apart from things like the Veteran Stormboy that we talked about earlier, can't really touch this. But what I love about it is, why I like the design of it, is having this secondary ability that says if the opponent's flying, it deals 6 damage instead. I'd love to see more of that kind of card design, right, where there's a secondary but somewhat situational thing. Like, playing this without a flyer, hitting a flyer is still good, but if it hits the flyer, it's like OP. And I think I love that design, like having that secondary situational thing. So it's one of the better design cards, I think, in the Eldar. Alright, let's move on. Next up, I'm going to talk about the Necrons. The Necrons. First one for me is Orican the Diviner himself. Now, sadly, the main decks that Orican seems to be doing well with are Scarab decks. I'm really looking forward to seeing a bit more diversity in the Necron card pool, and more diversity in the kind of play styles, because at the minute there's just sort of like a control, you know, like decent body deck, and then there's a Scarab deck or two, and Orican is used in that one. But his ability is fantastic. I love the design of this. My first faction were Necrons, and this guy really attracted me to it because I thought, wow, what a brilliant ability to be able to choose a card from your deck. So it shows you 3 cards from your deck and put one to the top. I just think that kind of manipulation of what you're going to get and what you're going to draw is incredibly powerful, and I still think it is. I still don't think we've seen the best from Orican yet. I think he is going to be in a star in many future Necron decks. So I love that flexibility and that design. And also only 1 energy, by the way, as well for that. So I quite like these like really cheap things, and it is a stratagem. So the Necrons have a lot of synergy with stratagems. So every time you play one, it triggers another effect. So this just has really good synergy with the faction. All right, next up, I want to talk about Uh, the Technomancer. So this is like really one of the engines of the Necrons, particularly the reanimate kind of build. Just a super powerful card, right? It comes down for 3 energy. It's got the 4 health, a nice body in its sense. It's not great in terms of trading, but it's all about the reanimation. So you put this guy down. As we just said with Oricon, for example, you can trigger Artifice with any stratagem, including that Warlord, for only 1 energy, and that will just reanimate any remnants that are on the board. And being able to do this behind a Lich Guard, for example, or a Tomb Blade, it's just super powerful, and it's one of the kind of stars of the Necron deck. Next up, I think I want to talk about, well, we just mentioned him, so we'll talk about him anyway. Now, the Lich Guard, bless him, he's gone through a little bit of hacking and slashing and chopping and changing in the last couple of months. I think he's been nerfed 2 or 3 times. He was absolutely broken. We used like 6 health and was it 5 melee attack? I don't know. So he has been toned down a little bit, but it's just the fact that even now he's still a good card, right? Like, you are trying to slow your opponent down. This is the mid-game road stop that you are looking for. You know, the combination of high health, as you said, it used to be 6 with 2 armor, and then remnant. So being able to bring this guy back, and it's really well designed that with the remnant, because you can do things like, you know, if your opponent gets you down to say like a certain amount of health, you can attack a bigger unit so that you die and then drop your Technomancer, for example, and then reanimate him. So you can kind of control the reanimation quite well. I think it's a really well designed card. It may have been a little bit over nerfed, to be honest, I'm not sure, but I still think it's probably a good card and a good one to include. My next card, it's one of my favourites in the Necrons, is the Triarch Stalker. I think this is a great, well designed card. It's a 7-drop, so you're looking for a good body, and you've kind of got one in the 7/7. That's made even better by regeneration, so you know, if you can't take out the full 7 health, then it's going to start regenerating, and I really like regeneration actually on big units. I think that's a really cool threat. The other thing I love about the Triarch Stalker is, again, these big expensive units that have an effect on the turn that they arrive. So this one's unique. I think Tower are going to have a similar thing where you already have a board, and when you drop the unit, it's not the unit that's necessarily doing the thing, it's the other units that were on the board. And this, obviously buffing everything to have +2 range attack, is super powerful. So really like the Triarch Stalker. And last but not least, we're talking about Necrons. I think the Tomb World is a well designed card. I might get some flack for that, let me know in comments what you think. But the thing is with the Tomb World, I do think that it was the first legendary I crafted, because you know, even as a beginner and someone new to the game, I was like, oh my god, so all my units die and go in the graveyard, and then I just bring them all back. How cool is that? And it is cool, right? Like, if we've been playing the game a long time, maybe we've kind of forgotten that, but it is really cool. It's really fun. It's a great payoff. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's super powerful, but you know what? It's a 9 energy. It used to be 8 energy, so it used to be even more broken. But it's just a well-designed card because it fits into the theme. They've obviously got to get the power level right with a card like this, but it's still a good design, I think, because it creates an entire archetype, and any card that creates new archetypes and ways of playing the faction, for me, is a well-designed card. So I really like the old Tomb World. Okay, so next up we're going to go on to the Chaos, but just before we do, just want to say, if you're enjoying it so far, guys, please like the video, and also if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. We're going to be doing a ton of content around the new Tau Empire that are dropping in a few days, and I really appreciate all of your support. Anyway, so let's jump on to the Chaos. Yeah, here we go. So for Chaos, I think the first one I want to talk about is the Noise Marine. What I like about the Noise Marine is I always like a 3-drop that scales. So like an early game card that's good on its own, you know, with the 4 energy, and your Warlord can always attack. So the worst time to play Noise Marine is if your Warlord is stunned. But outside of that, your Warlord can always trigger this ability once, which is Dark Pact of Excess, which gives it +2 melee and +2 range. So you've got a 3/4 for 4 health and for 3 energy. That's brilliant stats for a 3-drop. But why I think it's a great design is that that threat of scaling. Like, your opponent will panic when you drop this, and if they don't remove it, oh my god. This card, I have had this card at like 20 odd health, 20 odd damage, because it's scaled, and I love that. I love that kind of threat. So that's one of the good, well-designed cards for me. The next one that I want to talk about is Spawndom. I love this card. It's a really well-designed card because it's a counter to go wide, and there's not... The obvious thing is like to think, oh, your opponent's created a big horde of cards, you need an area of effect damage spell to get rid of them. Well, Spawndom is like a little bit more thoughtful. It's like, well, actually, we'll just punish them by creating an extra flanker for every unit that they've got. And then obviously having things like synergy with things like the Dark Oratory that can give a Chaos Pact to every unit on the board. Like, you can have some sick combinations. It also synergizes really well with the Plague Marine, which gains an ability every time a troop dies, so you can play the Spawndom plus the Plague Marine, trade all the little guys in, and then the Plague Marine is ridiculous. It's got like, you know, 7 packs of resilience, which then has synergy with frenzy, which or skins of fate, for example, that you could stealth up and draw a card for each pact on it. So there's some really good design synergy across multiple cards in the faction there, but I'm calling out Spawndom as the card that I think is like a really good trigger for that, and just allows the faction to come back a bit from behind. That is really important, and so yeah, Spawndom's excellent. Next up, I want to talk about the Bringer of Decay. Great card, really solid 5-drop, like solid stats, like not OP stats, but solid stats for 5. And the vulnerable 1 is fantastic. Enemies having vulnerable 1, there's so many ways we can use this. The difference between doing 2 and 3 damage is massive in this game. So for example, you can play Bringer of Decay, attack with Abaddon, or play Traitor's Hate, which does 2 damage to everything. That now does 3 damage to your opponent's stuff and only 2 to your stuff. So the vulnerable 1 is really superb. It can really put pressure on the opponent's Warlord. It can make your AoE spells better. It can just make Abaddon better when he's attacking, or your flankers. It's a really, again, it's another card that when it hits the board, your opponent is going to want to get rid of it as soon as possible. Really nice card, really nice ability. Alright, next up I want to talk about 2 of the 6-drops. So the first one for me is the Dark Apostle. This is a legendary card, but it's a superb card. Like, the stats are really good actually for a 6-drop, and most importantly, this ability is insane because Artifice is that it just triggers every time that you play a stratagem. So you can play any stratagem. It doesn't have to be a Dark Pact. That's one of the things that I like here. It can just be any. It could be Traitor's Hate, for example, or Spawndom. And then this guy gives a Dark Pact to every friendly troop. So speaking of Spawndom, you know, combining this guy with Spawndom is absolutely insane because your Dark Pacts can just absolutely go off, and every single one of those flankers gets an ability. It's a really powerful card, this, and you can play it on its own in the mid game as a nice kind of like just a tempo, but also in the late game playing this and comboing it is just with the spells, it can just be mental. You can just end up triggering so many Dark Pacts. It's really good. Last but not least, obviously we're going to talk about the Venom Crawler. Really well designed card. They recently buffed it by giving it the armor 1, and honestly I don't think they needed to. I know the Ecclesiarch's on a kind of campaign to try and get the armor removed and put on the Terminator. I'm kind of I'm in agreement with that. I think it would be better if the armor went on the Terminator instead of the Venom Crawler, because I actually think the Venom Crawler is good enough. I think you know, you could even make the Venom Crawler 7 health if you wanted and get rid of the armor. That would be more fair. But I even just the stats were good. You know, 6 energy, 6 health. I think that's great because it's giving you such a powerful ability in the stratagems costing less that I don't think you necessarily need to have the armor as well. So yeah, really cool. Really like the Venom Crawler. Alright, last but not least, let's talk about the Tyranids. So what do I think are some of the best design cards, Tyranid cards, sorry, in Warpforge? Well, the first one for me is going to be I mean, there's a lot of powerful cards here. Some of the one drops are powerful and they're in almost every deck. But in terms of best design, I really like Infinite Biomorphologies. They recently changed this from 3 energy to 2. It was good when it was 3, but it was a bit more niche. I think they've landed on the right cost for this, actually. I think 2 is correct. Why do I think it's a great design card? Because it just opens up so many choices for you, right? Like, again, you can respond to the board. Do I need range damage? Do I need stealth? Do I need armor? Do I need vanguard? I remember a game against Uriel Aggro that I had where I was going to lose the game, and I was like, what can I do? What can I do? And I realised I had Infinite Biomorphologies now, and I thought, oh, well, I could actually play that and try to get Vanguard. And I got Vanguard, and then I put it on like the I put it on the 4-drop, the auto kill stuff. What's that called? I put it on the Venom Throw because this guy has high health, but now he had Vanguard, and that's a really that's not the way you play these cards, right? Like, so it's a really obtruse kind of play line, but actually that was the play line that won me the game. So that's what I love. Anything that gives you flexibility, choices, autonomy, options to respond to the board, and that's why Infinite Biomorphologies is such a good card. And in a similar vein, I think the Node Beast is a really good card. Not quite as flashy and fancy, but Synapse is key to Tyranids, and you know, this guy is really perfectly started in my opinion, like as a 2 energy, 3 health, and the ability to do tied 1, so the choice to kind of go 2 next to each other or swarm up and make a big guy with 6 health is excellent, and there's a lot of different things you can do there. So for example, putting them next to each other if you're playing Neurothrope and giving them the +1 health, making both of you guys up to 4 health as well as the Warlord, or and that's what I mean, like there's so many different buffs and stratagems that you know, it makes sense to put them separate in some matchups and then in other matchups to put together. And also, depending what stage of the game, you know, you can just drop this on turn 2, or you could drop it on turn 8 if you've only got 2 energy left, like next to something else. But that flexibility of, do I want to play it on 2 or do I want to play a bigger one for 4, I really like it. It's a really well designed card, and it's in most Tyranid decks. Alright, next up, one of my absolute favourite cards in the Tyranids is the Carnifex. And again, it's dead simple. I love that it's a common card, first of all. This is the sort of stuff that I really want to see from a, you know, it's a really well designed card, because when you're new to the game, you don't just want to be looking at all the legendaries, wishing you had them and thinking, oh, well, in 4 months I'm going to have these cards. Like, it's good to have some really great cards, like meta cards, that you can kind of start learning the faction. The Carnifex is one of those. Carnifex is a top tier card that will be in meta decks, and so for Tyranid collectors, like from day one, they can access 2 of these and really start using it. And why is it so good? Again, having that flexibility. Now, don't get me wrong, more often than not, I choose the armor with the Carnifex. Occasionally I choose the ranged attack, actually, depending on the situation of the board that we need to respond to. Maybe the options could be a little bit different. That's an argument, but overall the principle of what this card's doing is superb. It's a really meaty, chunky unit, and it gives you a bit of choice as to how you want to evolve it. Really cool. Next up, gotta talk about it, is the Broodlord. One of the best legendaries in the game, certainly in the Tyranid faction. The guy's a beast, literally. Just 6-drop, perfect really, comes down with his stealth so he can't be taken out, and then the ability to trigger Synapse twice means you can just apply all sorts of crazy combos, whether it's the Ravenous Hunter to end the game doing something stupid like 26 damage just with the Broodlord and Swarmlord, or whether it's doing things like the Hardened Biology and getting like sick amounts of armor and health, or whether it's using the enhanced organism, I want to say, yeah, so you can kind of put it next to the Warlord and then suddenly cast this and then you get 6 health because it triggers twice. So the Broodlord is just absolutely superb and definitely the best Synapse creature in the faction. And my last one I want to talk about is an honourable mention, and that is it's the almost nearly nearly brilliantly designed card. I think this card is a little bit flawed, but I love the design intention behind this card. There's a ginormous beast that actually gets cheaper the more we trigger the the faction's ability, the synapse. I think that's brilliant. I think that's a great, because we can build decks around that. We can try and essentially get this guy for free. In theory, that's possible, but certainly for much less than 14. We could play this guy for 5, for example, or 3. So really great. Bit of a problem with the fact that when he's not in, he only gets cheaper if he's in your hand, not if he's in your deck. That's the thing I'm not so sure about, to be honest. But at the same time, I do really like the design intention behind this, and it almost creates like, it's really fun because it creates like a mini game for the player. Like there's a mini game going on in your hand management where you're trying to trigger synapse to get this guy down to a cheaper cost. So there we got it, guys. I think there are things that need changing and cards that we want to see. Plenty of bad cards and plenty of cards that need buffed, but we do have some really well designed cards that are a lot of fun to use, and every faction has some of them. So I just wanted to share that with you. Hope you found that helpful. Let me know in the comments which you agree with, and if there's any others that you think are really good from a design point of view, let me know that in the comments. Please like the video and please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't. If you have, as always, thank you very much, really appreciate it, and until next time, I'll see you in the next one.